So welcome everybody to another session of Responding to a Crisis, Conversations of Change. And today I have Theresa Lynch from W.A.D.S. But before we begin our conversation, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which Theresa and I are both meeting, and also where you might be watching this from. Pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I guess the point of these sessions, these conversations, is to give people an understanding of what's happening across the sector in terms of responding to the COVID-19 crisis, and also get an understanding of different services across the sector and different perspectives as well. So I'll let Theresa introduce herself, because she will no doubt do a much better job than I will, and then we can get started.
Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be part of these important conversations of change. Yes, my name's Theresa Lynch. I have the privilege of managing the Women's Alcohol and Drug Service. For those who don't know, the Women's Alcohol and Drug Service actually provides pregnancy care for women with complex drug and alcohol issues, and their presentations are also compounded by their complex psychosocial circumstances. So our remit is to care for that very vulnerable cohort of women. Another important responsibility for our service is to provide training and education across the state of Victoria. So our responsibility is to ensure that others in healthcare, others in drug and alcohol, welfare, all of those services who help to care for women impacted by drug and alcohol actually have the knowledge and skills and resources available to them to provide optimum care and support to vulnerable women and their infants. So that's our service. So that's what I'm here to talk a little bit about today.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for that. Such an important service as well. Yes. And beautiful that you do the two, you know, the capacity building as well as the service provision, which I think is super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's important probably to say why we do that. We used to work, when we first formed as an organisation, the state gave the Women's Hospital the responsibility. After about 10 years of service, they recognised that, you know, best care for pregnant women impacted by drug and alcohol is not always coming to a centralised service, not always travelling, you know, significant distances. It's actually really important for them to be close to the services that they are very familiar with, and it's actually not safe to be travelling if, you know, if you're actually struggling with your addictions and health. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's important to have tertiary level of care. So we do encourage women who have that level of health need to come to us. So that was why the government actually changed our remit to ensure that we were providing that support. So another thing that I want to be able to get out there today is to say that even during this COVID, I know it's had restrictions on us with regard to providing face-to-face training for other services. We're still available for consultation and support, but we are also very interested, and we have a training and education coordinator, and she'll shortly be sending out a survey just to ask people what they're wanting, because we can't know how long we're going to be restricted from this face-to-face and travel, and we know that that's a really critical part of our care. But so we're interested to know how we can do that better. So interested to hear from people.
Yeah, great. Yeah, amazing. So keep an eye out for that.
Yes.
Great.
I got that one in early.
Yeah, you remembered. So moving into, I guess, the more structured part of this session is the first question. So is what are you currently doing for yourself, for your staff, for the women that you serve, the children, you know, the children that you serve, and your organisation just generally, and I guess being part of a hospital, that brings another element of complexity to how, I guess, you've responded as the Women's Alcohol and Drug Service to the current situation in a way that, you know, you're ensuring people are safe, that they're able to maintain a sense of dignity and humanity through all of this as well.
It's been a very interesting time because we're always open for business. Pregnancy doesn't, babies have to be born. Yeah. So but it's been an interesting time for the hospital because we've clearly needed to monitor and put in place precautions to ensure both patients, staff, and the community are not at risk from COVID. So we very quickly put in place a whole range of screening measures to ensure that that people who came into the hospital were safe to attend the hospital. So that's been a big feature, and we did that pretty early on. So, and it's also, so we've changed the landscape of how we care a bit, and what that's meant is we've reduced sort of visitor contact. So we've reduced the numbers of people coming into the hospital, but it's been in doing all of those measures, which has been really important, it's also meant that I suspect that some people, patients and also others who are providing care for women, pregnant women, may not know that the hospital is still open and that it's still safe to attend the hospital. So, and I suspect that there are a whole range of other reasons why women are not able to come into the hospital because of the nature of how pandemics like this impact on the most vulnerable. So, and what I'm hearing is that access to treatment services is relatively reduced as we all navigate new service systems to address the risks. So that all makes sense, but unfortunately what it means is that people who would otherwise get the support and care to attend the hospital haven't been able to necessarily attend in a way that we had anticipated at the beginning. So I say all that because it's the framework of how do we care and what do we do. And so what we've had to do is position ourselves to ensure, and the hospital is doing this in a way to ensure that women can access our care remotely, and we've been investigating telehealth. But in our own service, what we have committed to is making sure that we regularly, like we have weekly phone contacts with women. And it's because they're a very vulnerable population, not always easy to contact, as most people in the drain, but it's a feature of what we do ordinarily, but it's really ramping up that process. And it's also just as a hospital-wide system, there are systems and new structures in place to support staff about how to best care for patients. So and within our own service, what we're doing is we're meeting regularly. We always do. We meet weekly, but it's almost daily about checking in to see which patients have coming in, who needs to be, who we anticipating needs to come in, who hasn't been in for a significant period of time. And we do ordinarily have women who don't come in for antenatal care, and there are systems in place to support them. But all of those services, like the outreach, access, health services, are struggling a bit to provide that face-to-face time care. So, yeah, I think I'll talk about this a bit later in some of your other questions that you have already positioned me with. So what are we doing as a team? We're also trying to make sure that that women know that we will still do face-to-face times with women. So, but we do prioritise those women who need the longer interventions for face-to-face time, because as you know, it's not recommended that you have long interventions with patients, and the most important priority is to ensure the health checks are being done, particularly the antenatal care checks. So we're trying to ensure that there's lots of collaboration between the staff and prioritising what needs to be done. So we, like most services, we've adopted the Zoom, and we do W.A.D.S, and so there's lots and lots of contact between each other through these mediums, which I think has been quite helpful, to be honest with you. But we're also sending out letters to women, which are encouraging them and supporting them, those that we don't know, and also encouraging and supporting other services to liaise with us and support us. And we're also using vehicles like this to ensure that services have a greater understanding that we're open for business. Please, encourage women to come in for their health care. So how do we do this with dignity? I'm hoping that this, that in everything that we do, dignity, shapes how we work, and for me, if we have a commitment to social justice, then we are going to always be framing our opportunities for change in a way that better understands the sort of structural inequalities,
Yep.
the unique needs of vulnerable people, so that social justice will enable us to think more acutely around dignity and compassion and care. So I think that might have answered your question, but I
think it did. Yeah. I love that, you know, framework and the already existing practice principles and philosophies ensure that, you know, what you are doing means that women are able to continue with a sense of dignity through, you know, through their pregnancy, you know, with their substance use. I mean, without the stigma and the judgment that is pretty rife, I would think, for the population that you know, for a whole range of different reasons, but compounded even more by the fact that there's substance use during pregnancy.
Well, absolutely. And one of the things I wanted to, I'll drift a little, you asked me a little bit about what we're doing for our staff. I think it's really important to, we have to care for our staff. We have to look out for one another. We have to keep checking in on one another to see that we're all okay.
Yeah.
Because compassion for our patients also mean, you know, we have to be compassionate with ourselves and compassionate to those that we care for. So, and I think that's the most humane thing that we can do, is to remember our sense of humanity in all of this.
Absolutely, yeah, because we're experiencing it as well. Like that's the thing, it's a collective experience, but, you know, the roles that we play maybe that, you know, much more aligned with supporting others, but there's still that recognition that we're going through a similar experience. So what are the needs that we have as individuals, as teams, as a service, as a sector? Yeah.
So just to say that I think what the Women's has done very well is, like, managers, there's support from our HR. I've attended one session just to make sure that I'm doing all the right things that I can do, and also there are daily updates that all staff get access to, which talk about health, which talk about their own needs, which just keep us on top of the sort of broader changes, what's happening within the hospital, how we can best look after ourselves and care for each other. So I think the hospital's done a pretty good job, and you'll find that most people working here feel really quite comfortable and well supported. But if I can go back though, I think that you asked what we're all doing when you talk about humanity. One of the things that we are concerned about is that we are hearing though that that in the sector there is an increase in smoking and drinking. You know, there's an increase for people because it is a vulnerable time, and if that's your vulnerability, that's your go-to point. But we're also hearing that the quality of drugs being used and being bought is actually diminishing. So it's important for us to recognise that with that comes dangers. Right. So I think for us, particularly if women are not coming into antenatal care, we know that women who don't come into antenatal care early usually have greater struggles around addressing their risk factors, you know, about optimising their health for their infant, optimising their health for themselves. And it also means in their social circumstances are also are at risk. They don't have a chance to sort of negate some of the negative consequences of homelessness, the negative consequences of lack of family support, the negative consequences of not actually having access to family violence support. So, but also the drug side of it compounds it as well. It makes that whole, it's like a little fire. It's like it's something that we need to address early, and we can actually extinguish some of those negative consequences. So I think that this is something that we're aware of, and we're aware that there will be, and we're anticipating that all of these, I don't want to say perils, but I'm looking for a word that, you know, may be coming, you know, in another wave of ill health. So we're positioning ourselves to better understand that as a service. So, but the other things that are concerning to us, though, in these times is that we're hearing that the incidence of violence to women is actually increasing, and we're hearing that people's mental health is, unraveling.
Yep.
And we're also, at the same time that we're hearing those messages, we're also hearing that the referrals to the family violence support services are actually diminishing. And what does that mean? So what we do think and what we suspect is that it means that women have less options for seeking help.
Yep.
And that women are potentially, having their movements curtailed by their abusive partners. So this is a worry for us, because we work in an environment where women who are impacted by drug and alcohol, particularly in our service, like we have over 90% of them have experienced violence, and often up to 66% are in current circumstances of violence and experiences. So these things are worrying to us. So it's very important that we're a robust service that can manage these things. And I suppose what I'm also concerned for is that for women who are living with men who use substances and alcohol as a form of coercive control, to oppress and hurt and deny them access to treatment, what does that mean for them? So we're positioning ourselves to better understand that, and we're putting in place some education and training at the moment to sort of promote through telehealth to help services. And there's some training that's going on at the moment. We're experimenting with ECHO, which is a new model of telehealth, not telehealth. I haven't got the name for it, but this is
like a community practice.
Yeah, like a community practice. So we're doing that. So I think those issues are important. So for us, in terms of what are we doing as a service, we really want to get the message out that, to ensure that women get access to treatment so that we can help them, support them, and ensure that they have the best outcomes for the infants and for themselves. So,
Amazing. And particularly given the pregnancy and substance abuse as discrete issues are risk factors when it comes to family violence. So when you're compounding that you're working with, having that awareness and understanding how to offer support, or at least to inform or harm minimisation or risk management, it would all be very, very helpful. Absolutely. So it'd be great for you to promote some of the workforce development and the training that you're doing as well. We can promote stuff through W.A.D.S, obviously, but I think there's definitely a need. People recognise that, and a lot of clinicians and practitioners are seeking that guidance and support, because understanding the risk factors are there, but also the usual mechanisms of perhaps connecting with a woman or communicating with a woman or offering support just aren't there anymore. So it's like, how do we do it in a different way? It's like we don't do it at all. It's just, what are the new techniques? So
what are they? Those things are the shift to telehealth is particularly important, but is it going to work for vulnerable people who don't have access to a phone or don't have money?
Or safe space.
Or a safe space to actually do that. So how do we do that? And also, even if for those who do have a phone, sometimes they might think, well, actually, I don't want anyone coming into my personal space. So, and that's a legitimate human right that they actually have. But I think, so we're learning in this process about what are the things that we have that are robust, that we do well. And I think that that's been really affirming. But what are the things that we don't do well? And, and I think that this pandemic has actually enabled us to look at, those processes and explore further what we can do. So.
Thank you. The only other question I had, and it may not be necessarily relevant, but I know with the limitations of people being able to visit people in a hospital and people being able to be present at, if women are giving birth, I mean, have you found that that's had an impact on women, or has it not been? I mean, it's only been a month or two. Have you found that that's had an impact on some of the people that you work with?
Having an access to treatment to pregnancy. So can you
not having, like, for family members or for people wanting to be present and to visit. I don't know if that's a huge issue for the populations that you're working with, or whether it's been
Definitely, I think. But at the same time, it actually frees up the women to have treatment unencumbered by the voices and the actions of others. So, and in fact, some of the clinicians are saying that it enables them to do their work quite well. Like they're free
great.
So that's an interesting insight.
That's a silver lining, isn't it?
Well, who would have guessed? But I think I think what it is heartbreaking for grandparents and that, and it is heartbreaking if you're a single person who doesn't have somebody to support you. So it is. So, but there are processes. Like I've actually written letters to address some of those issues. Then they go through a process, and we still have a compassion. And because, as you know, some of our women, they don't go home with their babies, but somebody else actually has to come in and care for the baby. So it's also about compassion for the baby, and about ensuring that the baby has, and the people who are going to care for the baby have best access. So it's not so cut and dry for a population like ours. We have to navigate what's actually best for the mother and for the infant. But there are some of, I know I've sort of gone off from a linear way of asking, which is what
we like tangents. We're happy with tangents.
But I just wanted to be able to say, you'll ask what others can do. I mean, part of our job here is, as we said earlier on, is that we already know that women, there's an inescapable prejudice that happens for pregnant women, a judgment that occurs. So it already prevents their access to treatment and care. Yeah. And our job always here is to try to work with people to sort of reduce those sort of value judgments, ensure that people understand the importance of women having care, because it's not just for medical reasons, it's from a social justice perspective. They have a right to the best care possible. And it's more important, in fact, that they have that right. So I think for me, what we need to do is encourage people to be really sensitive to the impact of COVID and on the material and structural realities of their circumstance, and to ask people to be informed. Inform yourself about how to best support pregnant women. Ask the questions, and then just be prepared to be challenged and advocate, and to ensure they have access to their health, have access to their housing, and access to all other necessary support. So I think we have to be prepared to challenge and advocate, and we do a lot of that here. But in our service system, I think we do it well in the drug and alcohol, but I think there needs to be a better understanding about the unique experiences of women. There needs to be a gender lens applied. The unique experiences of women, they're different to men's experiences, and we have to address that. So I think when I'm asking and what are we doing, these are the things that I want. One of your questions is, what do you want people to support you to do? That's how I'd like them to support us in our work, is to be better informed, to challenge, to advocate, to come on the journey with us. And we're actually here to listen, to support you. We really enjoy the challenges that you give us often, and we love working with the collaborations that we do, because particularly our rural colleagues, they often ask for our help, and they have very complex cases. But we think it's important to work with these complex cases and to provide that support. So,
So seeking to understand, being curious, applying a different perspective to your own understanding for another, being conscious of your own biases around some of these things. Is that in essence your call to action?
It is my call to action here. It is. And not because people aren't compassionate. I think there's lots of empathy for women. And there's lots of, I think there's all of that. But it's about, it's
the range of experiences as well. Like it might be, you have empathy or understanding about a particular cohort or a particular experience or a particular identity, but it's not necessarily the full range. So to understand that as well.
Yeah, one of the things that always fascinates me, but this issue of confidentiality, it's not uncommon for people to want to express a view or not, that they know of a pregnant woman, they know she hasn't had care, but their relationship is actually important. They haven't asked her, but they struggle with the idea of whether or not it's the right decision to then go back and talk to them, that they've talked to us, about pregnancy care, and the pregnancy is advancing. So these are the things that we need to really, I can't stress, and I think all of us here at the hospital always say, you cannot stress how important it is for women to come into care early, and the importance is the issue of confidentiality is important, but we're always talking about the risk of containing your actions on the infant, because the greater harm. So they're the key things, and in the COVID environment these things are really illuminated, they become more important. So I don't know, do you want me to go to question 3? I know we...
go. Lead
I don't know whether this is how your interviews go.
I'm flexible. Go for question 3. So just for the people listening, is what is the positive reframe? How do you see this current context, this current situation, this current experience as perhaps providing opportunities for improvement for the collective condition and for individual experiences?
And as your listeners will hear, they're very big questions, aren't they? They're
always big.
Huge.
Always big questions.
So I've got a smaller answer. I've probably answered much of it in my other answers. But I think the thing is, it's an opportunity to lift the veil, to look at the possibilities of a different future and different possibilities. That's what this has done for us. It's just lifting that veil of what we ordinarily do. And so for me, the crisis is also reminding us of our commitment to social justice, which I talked about before, because I think that will enable us to work within our commitment, to work in ways that deliver us appropriate responses to their individual needs, and also will enable us to work more completely to understand the needs of the oppressed and marginalised. And that's the group that we're working with. So that social justice framework is really, really very important. And again, I stress the importance of gender lens, is that we need to understand the unique experiences of women. So this is what this crisis is actually doing. And it is actually telling us that women are struggling in ways that are different to men in terms of accessing services. So we need to address that. But for me personally, what I try to do in situations like this, and I try to see hope in all that I do. And I often think that I can't, and I've been an activist now for over 30 years, and I can't always, I've realised, control the behaviours or the knowledges of others.
You wish you could though, really?
I can't, because that's a bit arrogant, and wouldn't want to be able to do. Yeah, I don't want to control. That's the whole point. But I can control how I respond and how I make decisions and the actions that I undertake, and I can respond how I'm interested and concerned for the well-being of others. These are things. So, for me, what I do. Maybe this is a bit revealing, but I do ask myself each day to be the best person that I can. I remind myself how important that is, and I ask myself to always look out for others, and I ask myself always to see how I can be of assistance. I think those small things just help you to centre yourself and know that we're here to do a job, and it's not a job, it's a life commitment for me. It's actually it's not necessary. I wouldn't call this a job. This is my life commitment. So I think it's important to care for others. But and finishing off, I think we have to try to really understand empathy. And I mean, I think empathy is really important, and kindness. I hear this a lot, and I'm reminded that a little bit of kindness goes a long way. I mean, maybe a simple statement, but it's actually
profound.
It can be very profound. So. But I think also these are the times though where we become bold. We actually say, okay, I'm going to be bold now. And one of the things I've recognised at the Women's is it's been quite bold. It's actually been learnt that it can create services relatively quickly. Sometimes we put in structures and boundaries and processes that are really quite overwhelming and takes away our creativity. But in times like a crisis like this, we can see that we can do things, and and once we eliminate the sort of obstacles, and the obstacles can come in physical structures or they can just come in our mind.
Correct.
So we have to free ourselves from those physical structures. So, but this crisis is also, what I've found and what I've heard, is it's given sometimes people peace. It's given people an opportunity to just to scale back a little bit and think about what's actually important. So for me, this crisis has just reframed for me how important it is, the work that we do, and how important it is to care for others, and particularly our responsibility is to care for those who are the most poor. So that's what we're doing in our work that we do here.
Such a strong ethical stance, so clearly values driven in what you do and how you engage. And I think this idea of reinforcing that and reflecting on that and ensuring that, I think a lot of what certainly what I've witnessed is a lot of people saying the right words, but not necessarily being supported or backed up by their actions. So I think when you're asking yourselves those really big, and you said they're small questions, I think they're huge questions. You know, how can I be a better person? How can I truly care for people every day? That puts you on the right path. Yeah, that puts you on the right path of action, because it's not just how you conceive of how you should behave or how society should be or how people should interact, but you're actually making that happen. And that's the big difference, because similar to empathy, you know, empathy is empathy, which is great. But unless you're actually demonstrating that in how you engage with people or how you communicate or how you advocate, then it's not anywhere near as useful as it could be. It's an applied skill.
It is, but it's not. It's something you have to say that I have to remind myself. It's not because I need to be reminded about it.
No.
It's the idea that it's so important to get it right, and for everybody it's a challenge, because we're all human. We all have our own failings. I'm definitely not perfect, so that's why I just remind myself to take breath. About what's important and be patient with myself as well. To be patient.
But you center, I think it's that reinforcing, and you're centering your day and your actions and your perspective around those values, as opposed to, we can get so swayed, right? You can get so caught up in the world and in work and in, you know, outside pressures and external pressures, that if you're not really grounded in those central kind of ethical values that you clearly have, then, you know, it's easy to get swept away. So
that's right. And it's really one of the things I've learned in this session is that we've got to what's important to us, and COVID actually means nothing to some of our women who are really poor and, you know, struggling to actually put food in their mouth, you know, to find a place to live, and are so struggling with their mental health. They don't have any knowledge or understanding of the barriers. Don't come here, do come here. You know, you just got to find that peace and that place to be able to support them in what's going to give them the greatest dignity and respect in for how they're managing. So it's all complex, but I think, you know, I have great faith in the sector, that they do. Everyone has the best intentions, you know, and they work together well, and the collaborations that we have with W.A.D.S and you know, as you may be aware, we've just started up a new network looking at homelessness and pregnancy, and there's a whole range of things that are happening across the sector that are really incredibly promising. And so yeah, I think we're in a good space to go forward, and the collaboration. Yeah, I could keep going. I should stop.
No. It's I've really enjoyed hearing your perspective and your experience, and a lot of it certainly it made sense to me and aligned with how I view things too. So that was really nice, but it was really inspiring. It's really inspiring to hear what you're doing and the really strong ethical framework that you have. I think it's super important, particularly in this work. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing.
Thank you. I really hope it's worked well. It was really lovely to be able to talk to others, and I look forward to hearing what other people are saying on this experience that you're doing. But can I encourage, I'm going to say it one more time, but just please ring us up at the hospital, and we're here for consultation, and we have a duty line, we have a 24-hour medical on-call consult for other health professionals and others who are needing support around how to manage patients. So we are absolutely here for you at the Women's.
I'll get some of those details off you after this, and I'll pop it in there when I put it on YouTube, so people have the details. Yeah.
All right. Well, take care, and thank you so much for this.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much. Okay.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.